Two of the guys with us, they ended up like rolling their ankles and kind of hurting themselves like pretty decently. We're all carrying like 50, 60 plus pounds on our back. And so there's these guys now who are hurt. Hey, I am Father Mark Mary with the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, and this is Ascension Presents. There is a phrase that you may have heard about, the preferential option for the poor. I've been reading through and spending some time with the Apostolic Exhortation Dilexi Te, which means I have loved you, the first apostolic exhortation of Pope Leo XIV, which I think is a laudable and praiseworthy thing to do, to read what we can and to listen when our Holy Father writes and speaks to us. And there's this term that comes up a couple of times, which I think can often be kind of misunderstood, which is this preferential option for the poor. Pulling from what Pope Leo XIV wrote, I'm just going to talk about like what it actually is, and then kind of share what I think it looks like and how we can actually respond to this and live this. So forgive me, I'm going to go ahead and read from the Apostolic Exhortation. This is paragraph 16. Referring to the preferential option for the poor, he writes, "This preference never indicates exclusivity or discrimination towards other groups, which would be impossible for God." All right, so God's preference, his heart for the poor, which we see kind of through scriptures and salvation history and in Jesus' own life. This isn't a limiting of his love or his heart. This isn't leading towards exclusivity or discrimination, but it is meant to emphasize God's actions, which are moved by compassion toward the poverty and weakness of all humanity, wanting to inaugurate a kingdom of justice, fraternity, and solidarity. God has a special place in his heart for those who are discriminated against and oppressed, and he asks us, his church, to make a decisive and a radical choice in favor of the weakest. The preferential option for the poor, is to have a heart like God. He shares kind of a couple times in the Apostolic Exhortation the parable of like Lazarus and the rich man. If you remember it, it's where like Lazarus was the poor beggar who like where the dog licked his sores, you know, and Lazarus, and then there's the rich man who just kind of ignored him and he lived in luxury, and he dies and he finds himself condemned, and Lazarus enjoying sort of the kingdom of heaven. Like the preferential option for the poor is to see Lazarus, to see the poor amongst us, and to actually respond to them and not just to ignore them and walk past them. And then he quotes John Paul II, and I think this is really, really good and really important. So the church's preferential relationship with the poor was consolidated, particularly from a doctrinal standpoint. His teaching saw in the option for the poor, and this is a quote, a special form of primacy in the exercise of Christian charity, to which the whole tradition of the church bears witness. So Jesus is asking us, the church, and Jesus is asking you, the Christian, to make a decisive and radical choice in the spirit of this primacy of the exercise of charity towards the poor. The most poignant example for me came in like a unique context. And I think it really kind of made sense of this for me and how we don't do this at all. Postulants are the new guys. So the first phase with us, we've had this sort of ongoing sort of tradition of taking them through this group called CORE out of Wyoming Catholic on this like 21-day really intense like backpacking trip. You don't shower, you carry all your stuff, it's awesome. And so one of these days, like our guides who are the postulants, and that's part of the thing, is they learn how to do it, and when they make mistakes, we kind of live with their mistakes. They made a wrong turn, they didn't go in the canyon when they're supposed to, so we're like walking when we're not supposed to be walking, and it's late and people are tired. And two of the guys with us, they ended up like rolling their ankles and kind of hurting themselves like pretty decently. But the thing is like all of us, we're all carrying like 50, 60 plus pounds on our back with all of our supplies and the water and the food, etc. And so there's these guys now who are hurt. We gotta get to where we gotta be to sleep, etc. And so there's like 14, 15 of us in the group. Two of them have bum ankles. So what do? The first thing we do is like we stop. We give them attention they need, the rest they need. We check out, evaluate the situation, right? We let their injury, first of all, like completely change everything that we're doing. We all stop for them, right? There's no just like ditching them. And I think that's kind of obvious. What we did then is we divide everything amongst ourselves. So now we're all carrying some of their burden, some of their load, not because we made a mistake, not because we tripped them, just because like they're injured, they're hurt, they're part of the group, and we're in it together. And then this is the most important thing, is the sort of our leaders out in the desert, the guys who kind of do this as their job, they put the two injured guys at the very front of our group. And so what this does is that they set the pace. The leaders of our group are going to be, if you will, like the weakest amongst us, not the strongest amongst us. So I'd say like our whole group made a decisive and radical choice in favor of the weakest. Our journey was going to be determined by them and what they could do. And I think that, like, putting the poor and the weakest among us at front, this is, I believe, like what kind of this preferential option for the poor like looks like. In society today, we kind of favor and orient our lives towards the strongest, like, and even in our own lives, okay, like I want to do what I want to do. And so I'm going to kind of create a life where I can do what I want to do, and anything that's going to hold me back, slow me down, limit me, I'm going to try and put some other place or box it in. Another kind of thing, which is like a small thing, but I think it's a preferential option for the poor, is like in a friary, we set our thermostat for the oldest among us. As you get a little bit older, you get a little bit less sort of able to and desirous and capable of like coping with the cold. And a lot of the young guys, they're excited, they're pumped. They want us to kind of push the envelope of how cold we can get the friary, but we're not going to let them set the thermostat. Right? We're going to make a preferential option for the poor. We're going to talk to the oldest amongst us, the weakest amongst us, be like, hey, what do you need? Like, where do you need it to be at for you to be able to live with a moderation of like comfort and appropriate comfortability in this friary? And he sets the thermostat. And I think there's just so many invitations to this about like having grandma come and live with us. As much as we can, just orienting our lives and making like decisive choices to prioritize and to actually like prioritize the poor in a way in which like our lives are reoriented around loving them and serving them, and not about just doing whatever we want. This is how Jesus loved us when he made that decisive and radical choice to come and to become man, to walk with us and to save us. And as he has loved us, as he has made this choice, he calls us also to make this choice again at the service of living the gospel, at the service of encountering the fullness of Jesus Christ. So many of our brothers and sisters are in need, and the way in which God desires to respond to that need is through his body, the church. And if we do not respond, they will continue to suffer. And we, like the rich man in the parable of Lazarus, like we will be judged and we will be held accountable for turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to the cry of the poor. Ask the Lord to invite us, to show us like what this preferential option for the poor looks like, how we can make decisive and radical choices in favor of the weakest. All right, thanks so much for watching. I look forward to being with you again next week. Remember, we are pilgrims on this earth. Somos peregrinos poco a poco, little by little. Vamos a llegar. We're going to make it. See y'all.